Hello, and welcome back this Monday morning. You are listening to our PAC Politics Podcast. Our podcast is brought to you by our United Resource PAC. We are a tax-exempt political organization. I am your host, Brittany McDowell, and thank you so much yet again for joining us here on our PAC Politics Podcast. Today, we are going to look more at stimulus checks. I know we talked about them on Friday, but I want to talk about them a little bit more. Specifically, we're going to look at how these past stimulus checks were actually spent. I know there was some conjecture around that initially, but we've actually got some data, some hardcore facts that explains to us, to Americans, to Congress, how these checks were spent. And it actually should influence their decision around us getting another set of stimulus checks. We're also going to talk about more fraud. I'll tell you what that fraud was connected to and explain more about it. Sit back. We're going to get into a good show. It's not going to be as lengthy as the one on Friday, but it's going to be informative nonetheless. Thank you so much for listening to our PAC Politics Podcast. Let's go ahead and get this show started. All right, so I know we talked about stimulus checks on Friday, and I promise you, this entire podcast is not around just stimulus checks. I know when we talk about COVID-19 and economic stimulus, there's a whole lot more that goes into this conversation beyond just stimulus checks. But just stay with me here for a second. I promise you, in the next segment of the show, we're going to talk about something other than stimulus checks. But right now, I want to talk about stimulus checks because there's been some information that has come out that I think needs to be addressed. Quite frankly, in the short time that this information has been out, I haven't really seen it talked about in the media. Other than the initial kind of projections and kind of guesstimations and stuff in the very beginning. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about what Americans spent their stimulus checks on, what they did with their stimulus checks. In the very beginning, I don't know if you were paying attention to the conversation, but we had politicians that would get on the TV or the radio or other forms of media, and they would talk about how, especially when they would talk about how stimulating the economy needs to be targeted. They would talk about how that targeting needed to happen even with the American consumer. Consumers needed to target their spending dollars in very specific ways. And they needed to do that because if you let the average American do what they wanted to do, they would just do something stupid. Okay? Notice here, consider everything that we've talked about in the very short time that this podcast has been relaunched. Consider kind of the running theme and assumption regarding the average everyday American consumer. You guys are too stupid. You don't know what to do with the $600. You don't know what to do with stimulus checks. You see that? But these companies know exactly what to do. Exactly what to do. We're going to talk about that in segment 2. But the running theme, kind of going back to my original point, was that Americans would be too stupid and they would just spend their money in a way that not only did not stimulate the economy, but actually made no sense for them. Because again, they're just absolutely too stupid. Now, here's the deal though. In the beginning, that was just the running thought. Those were just assumptions. But now we actually have data that has showed us recently that what Americans actually did was they didn't just do two things, but the two biggest things, the two most common things that occurred in very specific situations with individual Americans was that they either saved their stimulus checks, but there's a caveat to that. The people that saved their stimulus checks were those who were not your average everyday American. Now, they weren't by and large your wealthiest Americans by any means, but they were your Americans who, based on their salaries, based on what their income was, they already had disposable income to begin with. whether it was based on one income or multiple incomes, okay? But for the people who didn't have a lot of disposable, if any disposable income, those people didn't necessarily save their stimulus checks. They took their stimulus checks, and before they even did took care of any of the necessities like buying groceries or paying for childcare or getting the heater fixed or whatever the case was, most of them, before they even did that, matter of fact, half of Americans who fell into this bracket, those who didn't have a lot of disposable income, they used their stimulus checks to pay down debt. What kind of debt? Well, debt is money that you already had owed. So we're not talking about just debt that was produced during COVID-19 and the shutdown, but debt that they probably already had because they had such a limited income to begin with. Now, that's just an assumption, but I would assume it wasn't all debt that was just accumulated or acquired during COVID-19. But what I find pretty interesting, what I have found pretty interesting in the short amount of time that I've seen this data released, again, because we're no longer dealing with just assumptions of, what Americans are too dumb to do, given, just how dumb Americans are. This is not me. This is just some politicians. But what I have come to find is that even if, let me kind of back up here. When you read some of these articles, or when you listen to the very, very few media streams that even talk about this now that the data has come out and they can't just get on TV and talk about the dumb Americans, one of the things that you find is that it's kind of, they downplay the fact that about half of Americans decided to pay down debt. Oh, pay down debt. Oh, yeah, they just paid down debt, but that's not stimulating the economy. Excuse me? They won't come right out and say the words, but it wasn't stimulating the economy. But if you look at the overall context of what they are saying, before they kind of mention the fact and after it, and then you kind of take into consideration the tone, which you can even get from written communication, by the way. When you take into consideration the tone of what has been being said, it is very, very clear that they don't consider paying down debt to be part of what was supposed to be done, which was the stimulating of the economy, right? But here's the deal. Here is the deal. We live in a debt-fueled economy. Our capitalism requires debt. It requires massive amounts of debt. There are very few situations where, quite frankly, you can incur mass amounts of, or acquire mass amounts of wealth without debt. Very far and few between in terms of situations where that will occur. But so we're not going to get into this conversation about debt because we can go into that kind of rabbit hole. But point of it is, we live in a debt-fueled economy. And that considered, even if people are taking their money and their stimulus checks and they're using them to pay down debts that they owe, as opposed to going out there and doing the stupid things they thought people will do, which was like buy a TV for every room, TV for toilet, TV for the guest bedroom toilet, TV for the shower. I guess in their mind, I don't know if you guys remember, I'm not going to give away my age. We'll just say I'm in my 30s, but what was that, like the show on Cribs, on MTV Cribs, I guess they thought we were like all going to do that with $1,200, right? But whether a person was doing that or paying down debt or just going and buying simple things that they needed, absolute necessities like groceries or purchasing medicine, point of it is they were still using money, okay? And when you use money, you are still stimulating the economy. Let me show you. If I take my $1,200 check, or at least part of it, and I go and I buy groceries from the local grocery store, I help that grocery store pay its employees. I help it, run in terms of being able to purchase the products that they come and they sell. If I take that $1,200 or a part of it and I go and I buy TVs from Best Buy, if I buy 12 TVs because they happen to be on sale for we'll say $70 each, and because you got tax, and God forbid you need to get a some sort of a warranty on that thing, right? Now I know TVs are not $70, but this is just a hypothetical situation. Let's say I went to Best Buy and I bought 12 TVs because I watched an episode of MTV Cribs, and I was like, you know what? Pimp out my place. Like, if I decided to do that, I still was taking my money, giving it to Best Buy in exchange for the products that they provide. And during that exchange, they get money, which they can then go and use to pay their employees, acquire products at wholesale prices that they can then come back and sell, so on and so forth. Even, guys, hear me out. Even if you took that money and you went to a strip club and you made it rain, which I don't know if it's raining with $1,200. I mean, to a stripper, that might just be like a trickle drip. I don't know, But even if you went and you thought you were making it rain because maybe you couldn't spend the whole $1,200, but you could only go to the strip club and use $600 or $100. And you wanted to like look all good, so you got like 600 ones to make it rain. You still spent the $100 in the strip club. I don't know anything about strip clubs. I have never been to one, so I don't know if the stripper keeps the whole $600 or if she like splits it between the company, between the strip club, and like I'm sure she has to give them something. I don't know if it's like a percentage. I don't know, but you know what? I'm gonna figure this out, and then we'll come right back. So I am not going to say whether or not I tried to Google how the financial arrangement works between strippers and their establishments. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue. I clearly get off on tangents here. So anyhow, you know what? If you happen to know, you know what? No, I'm not going to tell you to tell me because I don't want to know. It's just one of those things that I kind of feel like because I, pride myself on being a certain type of, I'm not going to know. I'm just going to leave that alone. All right. So here's the deal, guys. Americans at the end of the day, they use their money to their stimulus checks, because I don't want to make some people mad by saying, that this was their money because they didn't earn it, even though it was given to them by the government, whatever. Americans, by and large, I'm not even say by and large, we'll just say half of them, because that was about what it was. About half of Americans use their stimulus checks to pay bills, okay? They use that money more than they used it to pimp out their wardrobes with fat chains and, Gucci belts and all of that, like everybody was thinking. They didn't do that. They didn't go out there and pimp their places with, 20 TVs per room. They didn't go into a TV-induced coma by buying mass amounts of video games that they stayed up for like 4 days straight and played. I'm going to tell you something because, I think this is a situation where you should get to know me a little bit. Like I said, I'm in my 30s, and I grew up. When they first brought out The Sims, I used to play The Sims a lot, like very early on when it first came out, and it like looked all wonky compared to how it looks now. You don't have like the stunning graphics that you do. Well, I'm not going to say stunning, but the great graphics that you do now. I kid you not, especially like, because I think I was like in middle school, high school, something like that when it came out. I would spend the entire weekend playing The Sims, like literally no sleep. My mom would come in my room and like I'd be sitting there like eyes all wide. I did take bathroom breaks. I would go to the kitchen, get food, and then come back. And I will tell you, I still play video games now, but I don't go into comas, and I only play them on my days off. I pretty much only play Civ 6. It's an awesome game. It's an empire building game. But anyways, another tangent. So anyways, Americans did not go out and they did not take their money and buy a whole bunch of video games. They didn't go out and buy a whole bunch of sporting goods. And they also didn't go get little Timmy that toy. I've got to take this call. I'll be right back. All right. I am sorry about that. So wrapping up here, because this doesn't need to be that long of a segment, and you clearly see I've gone off on a few different tangents, which again, I am known for doing. But you know what? I at least accept that about myself, right? I am honest about it. I don't deny it. But anywho, Americans, what they ultimately did, like I previously stated before I went off on my several tangents, they spent their money to pay bills. Okay, they spent their money to keep a roof over their head. They did pay for necessities such as groceries and childcare and stuff like that, but mainly, more than they paid for necessities, they paid down their debt. Okay, but here's something that I think is important, and the whole reason I'm talking about this. Well, there are two primary reasons. First and foremost, because I really think that we need to have a conversation, or at the very least acknowledge what people did with this money, because you saw very early on from politicians that there was, quite frankly, the mindset that Americans were too dumb to know what to do with this money in a way that would either help them personally, but primarily stimulate the economy. And again, as you heard me reference earlier, whether it's going out to the strip club and making it drizzle, or going to, or calling up Capital One and paying down, debt that you that you've acquired because you've only been able to make minimum payments, or God forbid, you haven't been able to make any payments, and you're like possibly going to get that account closed. In either case, you were stimulating the economy. You were putting money back into the economy. Now, I'm not naive, and I will never say that all forms of stimulating the economy are equal, but stimulation is stimulation nonetheless. Okay. That said, another reason that I have talked about this today is because we are clearly at a place where we're up against this question of, do we do this again? Now, the general consensus, as I have mentioned previously in previous podcasts, has been that we absolutely need to do this again. Yet we have seen no action on this. We've talked about that reason, right? And I'm not going to belabor that point and make this segment longer than it needs to be by addressing something that we've already talked about. Go back to one of the previous two podcasts and you'll kind of uncover more information about that. But these are the two reasons why I have decided to even talk about this. This is not something that, especially because it's not favorable to the narrative of the dumb Americans, this is not something that you are going to see talked about much by politicians who do not favor helping Americans, or who favor helping Americans, but in a limited capacity. It also does not generate a lot of views in terms of what we refer to as the mainstream media, and those who have had a negative slant, who've, again, promoted the story of dumb Americans, Americans making it rain, Americans pimping out cars and places. This is not going to get them the views that they want. So you're not really going to hear about it. So I wanted to at least take this brief time with you to let you know that the data shows that you, the average American, you know what you're doing when you spend the money that is given to you in the form of a stimulus check. You take that money and you stimulate the economy. And you also stimulate your own personal economy, your family's economy, your community's economy. And again, that plays into the larger American economy. But the deal is, people are still struggling. And because they are struggling, we need more checks. And when you couple the fact that people are still struggling and we need more checks, and they actually did stimulate the economy in the past, it makes it all the more clear that we need to expediently get these checks out to the hands of Americans. Bills have kept coming. Unemployment, yes, it has decreased, but it is still at record levels. Okay, people are either dealing with situations, not all, but a majority of people are in situations where they are no longer employed, they've been let go, or they've been furloughed, or even if they've kept their job, They may have been impacted in some sort of negative way. Maybe they've seen decreased hours or a decrease in their hourly pay rate. But even with all of that, whether it's unemployment or a decrease in pay rate, the bills are still coming in. The price of stuff is still going up. I have got to learn to turn stuff off. I am sorry about that. The price of stuff is still going up. Okay? Food. I know at one point gas got ridiculously low and I almost wanted to like buy up all the gas I could, freeze it, like put it in the freezer, write the date on it and like bring it out for like another day, right? But it's everything is going up. Everything. It's a sad situation. About 88%, so close to 90% of households that annually make $25,000 or less, these are the people who are getting those stimulus checks and immediately using them, which is why I don't understand why there's pushback from some, not all, on either just not helping those who are the poorest of us all or really barely helping the poorest of us all. Why? Those are the ones who are going to do the one thing we want most, which is to stimulate the economy. That helps the economy. When you give somebody who makes $20,000 a year, who, has again been dealing with either a layoff or whatever the case might be, dealing with something, they stimulate the economy. I'll be right back. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Be sure to check out our Facebook page, which you can find a link to it in the description box of this episode. If you come on over to our Facebook page, you'll find that we talk more about the issue of COVID-19 economic stimulus and relief. I hope to see you over there. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show. My whole goal for this segment is not even to get information conveyed, but is literally to do it without a phone call or some type of interruption. All right. So let's talk about fraud. It's not something you really hear every day, right? Let's talk about fraud because we've got more of it. Guys, we're dealing with another fraudulent Paycheck Protection Program loan, which is kind of ironic to me when you consider what our last segment was about, which was about stimulus checks, right? And what people were going to be using stimulus checks on and how they were going to be like pimping out everything and not really stimulating the economy. And Lord forbid you think about the $600 that the unemployed were receiving, and they don't deserve it. And there's going to be those lazy people. I want you to keep all what you've been hearing about the unemployed and the average Americans and stimulus checks as I kind of tell you a little bit about this. Okay, these recent developments. The U.S. Department of Justice last week, they charged a man who's in Washington, D.C. They charged him because he received, get this, not one, but over $2 million in fraudulent COVID-19 stimulus money, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. And not only did he use that $2.1 million and get it for himself that he was not supposed to get, he went and he bought a car. Now, mind you, the car that he bought was not luxurious. When we first heard about, because this isn't the first form of fraud that we've heard about with the PPP. I didn't cover it because our podcast wasn't back up and going when it occurred. But there was another gentleman, I don't remember his name, nor do I remember the type of car. I just remember that it was a luxurious car. And I don't know where he was from. I want to say Florida, but don't quote me on it. But the guy, nonetheless, in the first instance, he bought like a luxury car. This guy, I think he thought he was being a little bit smart and was like, you know what, they're not going to catch me out here, getting that, McLaren or whatever the deal was, he was like, I'm going to go out and they're not going to catch me. They will never suspect anything because I'm going to get a Kia Stinger. Now, no disrespect, not knocking. I'm not saying that those aren't nice. I quite honestly, I don't know if I've seen one. I can't recall off the top of my head what that is, but I mean, truth be told, as we all know, some brands are luxurious and some are not. Not saying that they don't have nice cars, but when you think of luxury, you don't exactly think of Kia. You don't think of them having, cars that are, $100,000 plus or something like that. Maybe they do. I don't know. If that is the case, let me know. But anyways, I think this is just me, somebody who goes out of their way to get $2.1 million. I would think that he probably wanted something a little bit nicer, but he probably said, you know what? This other guy got caught getting this luxury car. Not saying it was the car that got him, but I'm going to try and be on the DL and stick with something and just kind of like blend in with everybody. But his plan did not work because he still got charged. And the U.S. Department of Justice still came after him. And he didn't just buy the car. He bought a bunch of other luxury goods, which we're not going to talk about. But the deal is that he is not the first person that we have heard about this happening with. Okay? I'm not going to cover the whole PPP and what that was into or what exactly it was supposed to completely entail, but just kind of the general description of what it was for, what it was supposed to do. Was money from Congress, roughly about $300 billion that was supposed to be used and given to business owners, and they were supposed to use that money to pay rent, mortgages, and keep their employees on payroll, and they were supposed to do specific things with it. Okay, right? Again, keep in mind what we just talked about in segment 1. About, targeting the economy and how Americans are supposed to do this. And then keep in mind what I've said in other episodes about this, especially the $600 unemployment and how, oh my gosh, we don't need to give the unemployment because people, they're just going to be, what is the word that they like to use? It disincentivizes people, right? Well, here's the thing. Forget the fraud. We'll talk more about the fraud in just a second. But why do we want to use taxpayer money to help businesses pay their rent and their mortgage if they have little to no customers? Even if they still have customers, I'm not saying that their customers are completely going away, but they are definitely going to see a reduction in customers. Why do we want to pay their rent and mortgage? Whether you're for it or against it, just kind of think about that in your head. What would that do to the economy? Wouldn't it be super horrible for the economy to just allow a company to go under? Why do we want to use taxpayer money to help a business keep employees if people in their local communities can't work or they've been laid off, and as a result of that, and not just laid off because they were like bad employees, but like laid off because, we've had this thing called a pandemic going around, and these people, they can't purchase the products or services from these businesses. Or even if they can, they do it, at a reduced rate. I don't know if reduced rate, they're not doing it as much, or maybe instead of them going and spending, I don't know, what did I used to spend on groceries? Like $100 a week on groceries, a single person. Maybe now they can only do, $50 a week in groceries, or, whatever the case was. Why do we want to give them money? I really want us, and I'm tempted to drag you guys back into the conversation I had on Friday about propping up businesses that are not providing value or willing or able, because some people might be willing to adapt their business, but they're just not able. Like, I'm not going to drag you down the conversation of should we or should we not be doing that, especially with my money. I just paid taxes on the 15th of July. I don't get a big tax return like some people do. One, don't have any kids, so I don't get like $50 million just for, okay, let me leave it alone. But I, because of capital gains and because of owning a business, then I essentially I don't get a fat tax return. I get a fat tax check due. So I got one due on the 15th that, mind you, they didn't pull it out like at 6 p.m. on the 15th. I think it was like 12:54 in the morning that they pulled it out of my account. But anyways, another tangent. But it's my money. And I think that not all of it, but some of it is mine. And I think that there should be accountability. Like, I want to know why. Why are we propping up these businesses that, again, either can't or won't adapt, or just aren't providing value anymore, either because the market has changed and their services or products don't have the same amount of value. They don't have the same valuation as they did compared to the old economy. But I don't know. Anyways, but getting back to the fraud, kind of reeling myself back in before I go on yet another tangent. This situation with this guy from Washington, D.C., it's not a lot. It's not like we're seeing this happen all the time. But this is yet another case, the third case that we've seen of fraud. Do I think there's only been 3 cases? Absolutely not. And the fraud may not be this blatant in most cases. It may not be, the details of what he did. And I didn't get into that. You can go and look it up for yourself because it was kind of a long, convoluted story. But the fraud may not be as blatant as somebody either creating companies that don't exist or, just doing a whole convoluted list of things to make the fraud appear to not be fraud. But the fraud may have been, in many cases, I suspect, fraud in the form of lying on their applications, their PPP applications. When they talk about unemployment, and I'm going to end with this, and they talk about that $600. We don't talk about how it's helped to prop up the economy. Or if we do, we talk about that just a little bit, just enough to make it seem like we're trying to pay attention to data. But I think the same standards and rules that they apply to the conversation around the $600 for unemployment for individual Americans needs to apply to this situation as well. And what do I mean by that? When we talked about the $600 for unemployment, we talked about, there's a disincentive for people to work because they are getting money, they are getting help. Well, you know what, Joe Schmo, people are committing fraud. So in my mind, we need to stop giving people money. There's a disincentive to, I don't know. I mean, if you ask me, there's an incentive to commit fraud, from the application process on down, whether it's applying or how you actually utilize the funds, because the oversight is, I'm not saying it's not there, but it's not as great as it can be. But if you ask me about the disincentive, there's a disincentive to get back to running a business that provides value and adapts. When you have a business that provides value and adapts, you get rewarded. But if you have a business where, I'm just going to get money from daddy government, there's no incentive to get back to running a business that provides value and adapts and gets rewarded by consumers for products and services, which results in profit. Stop welfare for the poorly run companies, period. Hey you, have you checked out our website yet? You can find a link to it in the description box of this episode. Over on our website, you can learn more about who we are, what we do, the issue of COVID-19 economic stimulus and relief, where we stand on the issue, what we want to see. You can learn more about the policies that we support and oppose that are connected to the issue. You can even check out our latest blog posts. You'll also be able to contact us if you wish. Check it out. All right, that wraps it up for this Monday episode of our PAC Politics Podcast. I thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you now understand a little bit more about how these stimulus checks were used. So that way you don't feel bad about needing it, because you now know that you actually did what you were supposed to do, which was stimulated the economy. And no, this is just from me. I don't care if you took it and you make it drizzle at the strip club, you still stimulated the economy. I don't care if you went to when Bath and Body Works had their semi-annual sale, them and Victoria's Secret. I don't care if you went and you bought $400 worth of products. You still stimulated the economy. I don't care if you paid your overdue Comcast bills. You still stimulated the economy, and don't ever feel bad about helping America in that way. If you ask me, you're an American hero, because while these politicians are out there and they are doing everything they can to stop stimulating the economy, you, my friends, my listeners, are doing everything you need to do to stimulate the economy. And you're not out there committing fraud while you do it, unlike the bozos we've recently heard about. So, again, thank you so much for tuning in to our PAC Politics podcast. Look out for our episode on Wednesday. Enjoy your week. And I will see you on the flip side.